Hey, Earl.
Hey, how you doing, Teri?
So good. So good. It's a beautiful day
Good.
here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania.
Not so beautiful here in rainy, dark Kent, but hey, that's how it goes. So first of all, just want to welcome everybody and introduce ourselves. So I'm not going to go through a long introduction. If you don't know who we are, just check out our profiles on LinkedIn and you'll get a much better sense. And just to say, the reason why we started doing this is myself and Teri, who are both have a background in helping people build resilience. We're having conversations, and we just thought this would be a great place and space to actually start to have this conversation as a wider conversation with the people who we serve and people in our community, start to raise awareness of what resilience, chronic stress, and burnout are and how they impact us. So really just jumping straight in, Teri, kind of what's your intention for this call, and how do you define resilience or even radical resilience?
Yeah, so my intention for the conversations that we have, the work that I do and that I know that you do in the world, and then of course the intention for this time together where we're sharing our conversations and our learnings with other people is to sort of shake up this prevailing narrative that we see. You see it all over LinkedIn. You really see it all over social media. It's shake up this narrative that around chronic stress and burnout that sort of has the solution residing outside of us individually. So whether it's an organization that needs to change and needs to address chronic stress and burnout, or it is a leadership issue, it's not to say at all that leaders and organizations don't need to do something differently, particularly when it comes to toxic leadership and toxic cultures. But the reality is that we as individuals are fully empowered to take control of how we're experiencing whatever it is that's going in our lives. I'm a living, breathing example of that, as are you, which informs a lot of our conversations, right? But I think what has happened is we have sort of accepted this idea, or we've sort of forgotten, that we have this innate power, and so we're not stepping into it, and we're not using it. And by the way, that's not really the fault of us as individuals, because we've been socialized to believe that. It's all over the place. An example is burnout is the sort of definition of that is an organizational phenomenon, a workplace phenomenon, which is crazy, because I certainly have experienced burnout at a time when I loved my job, and my job was sort of a respite from what was going on that really caused me to crash and burn. So I think even that, the fact that it's socialized sort of has us trapped, but there's a way out, and that's what these conversations are about.
Yeah, excellent. And welcome, Anya, into the chat. And if anyone's got any questions or reflections to anything that we say, feel free to share it. So I love what you said there, Teri. And I think, for me, a lot of the work that I do is with founders and solopreneurs. And what you said there hit like such a nail on the head, because that workplace phenomenon, once we hit COVID, that workplace space went into the homes for lots of people. So instead of it being in an office with a toxic boss or whatever it was, it then came to this place of, actually, I'm working remotely, I'm working from home, I've got kids in the background, I've got things happening at home with your partner or whatever it might be. It might be isolation. And for a lot of people, what happens is what we call misalignment. And I know that happened with me, which is in 2017, I got into overwhelm, and I was also in misalignment. And those are the two key factors that I see in the clients that I work with, in the my own experiences, where burnout really comes from, which is overwhelmed. There's too much going on. And so we're overwhelmed, and then we start to go into what I call functional burnout and misalignment, where your values don't align with your behaviors, or what's happening in your life doesn't align with your vision, or whatever those things might be. So for me, when we understand that resilience is potentially an antidote to chronic stress and burnout, but it's very essential. And the way that I describe resilience, it's the courage, capability, and capacity to face the challenges and get through those challenges that we have in life, whether that's in the work, professional life, or personal life. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I just realized when you gave your definition of resilience, I think I didn't go into mine. And it is really our innate power to handle whatever life throws at us. And I do mean whatever. And I don't say that lightly because of my life experience. So I do believe that we are built for this. We are built for this life, including all of the various life experiences that come at us. I want to make sure and highlight here that doesn't mean it's easy, and that doesn't mean that it doesn't come with pain, because pain is a natural part of life's experiences. And I emphasize natural part. It's natural to feel pain, but it is also natural, it's innate in us to be able to still experience, be in control of how we experience our lives in a positive way. One of the conversations that we had recently, when you'd had the most recent loss in your life, which you've shared with a bit on LinkedIn, is that it was shortly after, and you shared that, and these are my words, so, but you shared that you were both feeling the pain and also you could still experience joy. That is the epitome of resilience. You know, it's acknowledging the hard and the difficult emotions that go with that, but also knowing that that is not all that defines you. And there is more of you, and it does change, and you have the capacity within you to be in control of how you experience that. So, yeah. And from an organizational standpoint, I mean, what I see a lot with leaders that I work with is their idea of modeling resilience is to take on more so that they can alleviate stress from the people around them. And then what they end up doing is modeling what overwhelm looks like, right? Because they're just, taking on more and taking on more, and they're not modeling what it looks like to be very courageous about leaving at 5 o'clock or really taking the weekend off. So often we see leaders and organizations modeling what hard work looks like by, sending emails late in the evening or being the last one leaving. And that's, sort of exactly the opposite of what modeling resilience is, because we need to feed that inner power, right? We need to have time, quiet time and slower time where that power and that awareness of that innate power can emerge.
Yeah, and such a good point, and thank you for reminding me of what I shared, and that's what I talk about, the capacity. It's the capacity to hold more than one perspective, more than one reality, which is, okay, it's hard, I'm struggling to get through this, and yet I know it's going to be worthwhile. And definitely that's a lot of the work that I see with solopreneurs that's really important, which is, this is challenging, this is difficult, founders, people who are trying to do something that's against the grain, or something that's quite innovative or disruptive, because now you're coming up against resistance. And so generating that capacity becomes really, really important. But one of the biggest challenges, and I'd like us both to speak to this, and I'll go first, and then I'll kind of ask you, which is, we both wrote chapters in the book called Leading with Self-Awareness with the Change and Work community. And what role, there you go. And what role does self-awareness have to how we bring resilience into the fray? How do we use that as a resource? And I was having this conversation just recently with somebody who wasn't a client, but just a friend, and explaining the difference. And the analogy that I use, which is, if you imagine you're driving a car, if you learned to drive maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, you kind of had a car that had a radio, a heater, and a steering wheel, so on and so forth, right? But now we've got cars that have got music systems, entertainment systems, computers, lights, and then you've got maybe your phone. And I've seen this with people having Zoom calls whilst they're driving, and you've got your computer. Yeah, right. We've been there, right? And you've got these things that are happening inside the car, right? You might have, you know, family members, children screaming, fighting in the background, eating food. You've got your hot drink, everything that's going on, and you're on your Zoom call, and then you're navigating the road. And then you've got flashing signs, you've got more things to look at. And this is when overwhelm starts to happen, because we've got so much going on. And the way that I use this analogy as well is that if you think of the mind is not just the brain. The mind is the awareness that we have. And the mind is like the driver in the car. It's not the car, but it's in the car. And so bringing that awareness to what the driver's doing, because if the driver messes up, the car crashes or the car breaks down, because there's warning lights going off in the car. You know, there's so many things that can be going on. And how do we practice those things to make sure that we've got that level of consciousness so we can be resilient? So I don't know if that's helpful or useful.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of some of my studies recently as I'm doing this neuroscience coaching certification program, and it talks about how many bits of information come at us every day. And you just went through a great example of it. But we're bombarded with information, but our brain can really only process a tiny fraction of that.
I think it's about 50 bits. I think
it's
exactly
about 50 bits.
And yes. I think we get kind of like 500 gigabytes of information that comes through to us, or
it's
something
some
like
massive
that.
amount, some massive amount. And, you know, we're having this conversation and I am calm and we are, you know, centered. But it just as an example, you know, I love my birds, right? And my birds are right outside in this window and they're going crazy. And, you know, occasionally a car will drive by and, you know, maybe somebody's going to walk behind me. But and I'm in a really calm environment and I still have a lot of information. Well, that's the way that is how it is with all of us every single day. And what practices that bring us back to ourselves, that bring our attention inward, do for us when we practice it consistently is they help us bring our awareness into how we're experiencing all of those different bits of information. And then it helps us prioritize those bits of information, that 50 bits. It helps us prioritize that so that we're focusing on the things that are most important to us, that are most aligned with our values and our purpose. Otherwise, without self-awareness, we are just at the mercy of all of the information that's coming at us. And by the way, I mean, this is particularly a hot topic right now and has been for some time. Social media and everything that comes at us on our phones, that is, you know, almost by design stealing our attention. And so being very intentional about how we bring our awareness inward and we be in control, we exercise control over where we're going to focus our attention is an important part of being in control of how we experience our lives.
Absolutely. And with that, I'd just like to take this opportunity. So whether you're watching live now or you're watching this on a record, as long as you're not driving, I just invite you to take a moment on how we can do that, because we talk about self-awareness and what does it mean and how can we use that in a way that can help us either as an arrival practice for a meeting or before you're preparing for public speaking, or just generally you find that you're sitting at your computer just staring at the screen and not sure what you're doing next, procrastinating. So the invitation really is maybe to close your eyes, but at least just become aware of your breath and breathing in and the rise and the fall of your lungs, your chest, your diaphragm, and just breathing in and just noticing the different parts of your body. And specifically at this point, is there a place or a space where you can notice tension? And where is that tension in your body? Is that tension in your shoulders? Is that tension in your abdominal area? Is that tension in your face? Without judgment, without trying to move it away, just notice and just breathe. And if it doesn't feel like it belongs there right now, just let it go. Just soften that area. The other thing you can do now is also just go to that place in you that never has any tension, that is always soft, that is always relaxed. Just find that space, wherever that space may be for you, and just bringing your awareness to that space and breathing into that space and connecting to that space. Okay. And just open your eyes, just bring your awareness back. And, you know, the reason why I wanted to just briefly do that was it doesn't take long to put something in place and put small rituals, practice, habits in place to help us just bring our awareness back to ourselves and kind of say, actually, let me just pause, slow down and see what's happening. I mean, how was that for you, Teri, just doing that in that moment?
Yeah, well, it was wonderful. And it reminds me of a few days ago, or maybe it was last week, when we got on a call, and it was fairly early for me. I can't remember what time it was, but I'd already had a really busy morning. And so when I got on our call, I brought all this heightened energy. I was pretty amped up, you know, and I was like, you know, I have to do this and I have to do this and I need to make this call. And, you know, and we probably got, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes into it. And you were like, let's just stop and have an arrival practice. And so we did that, and you walked through a very similar process as you did. And I came out of that in a completely different place. And so from a neurological standpoint, what's happening there is because I think a lot of people are like, yeah, that's great, I don't have time for that. But there's very real science behind what's happening there. We are, you know, generally speaking, walking through the world in some heightened state. Our autonomic nervous system is in some heightened state. Our sympathetic nervous system is engaged to some degree. And very often it is this low level engagement that we don't even notice anymore. Like, you really notice if you have to slam on the brakes when you're, you know, in traffic or something like that, then you really notice. But because that's what the chronic is all about, this chronic stress, we don't even notice that we're in this heightened state of awareness. Like, I didn't notice when I came to our call, right? And so we have cortisol running through our system at some level, and which hijacks our executive functioning areas of our brain. We literally can't think clearly. And so an exercise like that, and, you know, I talk about what I use in my practice and with my clients is heart-focused breathing, heart math techniques, which are, you know, all the research is there to show how that has a direct impact on your autonomic nervous system and calming you down and engaging your executive functioning areas of your brain. But what you just walked through does that same thing. It puts us in a place of, you know, having our faculties, having coherence, heart-brain coherence. And the more we do that, the easier it is for us to come back and to recognize when we're out of coherence. And then to do some very simple practice to get us back into coherence. It's wonderful to be led, but we all have the ability to do this all on our own when you're sitting in traffic, like you said, before you start a meeting. We all have that capacity, which goes to sort of why we're talking about what we're talking about. We have these individually. It is our innate human ability to manage how we experience our lives, how we manage our physiology, and then how we manage how we experience our lives. And that's why we're having these conversations publicly, is because that's a narrative that we want to change, is that, but in order for us to feel good, for us to enjoy our jobs, for us to be okay with what's going on in our lives, we have to wait for something outside of us to change. The organization, our leader, the traffic, the weather, you know, our children, whatever it is. And that's simply not true. It's a false narrative. And that's why we're having these conversations.
Absolutely. And that kind of brings me to the model that I use, because I totally agree, which is we have this innate capability, and I call that resilience 0.1. That's our flight, fight, freeze. That's what we were born with. So, you know, you lived in the forest or the jungle, and, you know, a bear comes out or a tiger comes out. You either fight it or you freeze, or, you know, you run. And then we've got, you know, 2.0 of resilience, which is the entrainment. And again, it's something that we've been doing for many generations. So whether it's the Maasai warriors in Africa that would go and kill a lion, or in the tribes in South America, you put the glove on with the bullet ants and they inject you with this absolutely painful stinging thing. So you entrain your mind to actually do the hard things. So guess what? You can do the hard things. You've done the hard things, so you know you can do the hard things, right? But we live in a time when we are bombarded with information, and so our mind, our senses, our this capacity is being diminished all the time. So our self-awareness is, even though we've got these as innate traits, self-awareness and resilience, it can also be diminished. So therefore we have to create a barrier around it. And that's where I'll talk about 3.0, which is how do you create those systems, those frameworks, those rituals, those connections, those relationships that mean that you're able to actually look after it. So just using the car analogy again, you're driving along, you've got the Zoom call, you've got the kids screaming, you've got the entertainment system, and you've got these warning lights. But you might not know what those warning lights are, which is what happens with a lot of people in functional burnout. They've got the warnings, but they just don't understand the warnings. They've got brain fog, they've got neuromuscular lock, they've got tension in their body, they can't sleep, they've got insomnia, they've got numbing, they've got eating habits, drinking half a bottle of wine, whatever's going on, they can't see the warning signs. And you can still function. That doesn't mean you're okay. It just means that you can still function. And when you start to build resilience 3.0, this is kind of like, okay, now you've got breakdown cover. So if something happens, you can get the car recovered, or you've got a mechanic that you can take the car to and fix it. And, or you've learned how to fix it. You do understand what those warning lights are. And I think that's the thing that's missing for a lot of people today, because that's not how we were built. So we have to be radical. And this is where radical resilience comes in. It's radical because that's not our natural way. This is a way that we really need to nurture.
I love what Anya just said. I used to take pride in pushing past all of those warning signs. And I still see leaders like waving the flag of, look how much I can do and look how far I can push myself. And the reality is, you're not doing any of those things. And everything that you just said, all of those, you know, the sleeplessness and all of, you know, that all of that is us being hijacked, our nervous system being hijacked. It's the cortisol running through our body and hijacking our brain. So we have brain fog, we can't sleep, we can't make good decisions. We don't even know that we're not really making good decisions. We're not self-aware, and we're not emotionally regulating, and we're not connecting from a social standpoint with others from a truly authentic place. Having said that, what that looks like from a societal perspective is she's nailing it. Look at her. I mean, she's, you know, I'm sure Anya, who we know used to work for Meta, man, she's nailing it. She's doing all the things.
She's earning her stripes.
Right.
She's earning her stripes. Yeah. It's like,
right.
Good. Pin a medal. Yeah.
But that's breaking down. We can see that everywhere. You know, people are becoming more aware that that feels superficial to me. Something else needs to change. You know, I need to feel calm. I need to recognize when I'm in these heightened states that aren't serving me well. And this is going to be another session, but in addition to, you know, it impacting our sleep and our ability to make good decisions and brain fog and all of that, it also has a direct impact on our health. Being in that chronic state has a direct impact on our physical health, not just emotional and mental, but our physical health as well. So that's another topic, but yeah.
Yeah, and our relationships, you snap at the kids, you snap at your partner, you start to eat in a certain way. So our relationship with us, and which comes back to the, what's happening with your health, you start to eat crap. You feel like crap, so you eat crap,
Numbing.
or you go into numbing.
Yeah.
And so it's so important that level of self-awareness. But the other thing is, resilience doesn't always have to be reactive. It can be proactive. And I think that's the work that I love, the conversations that we're having and the things that we're planning for in the future, for solopreneurs, for founders, for organizations, for leaders, that there are strategies, there's techniques, there's resources that you can start to work with that can help you to start to weather the storm, because the storm's going to happen, right? You've got the car. Coming back to my car analogy, it's not a case of if the car's going to break down, it's when the car's going to break down,
right?
Or when you get into an accident. Because if you're driving for many, many years, the likelihood is that something's going to happen. It doesn't have to be your fault. It just means that the probability starts to increase. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
So
a real life example of that is, so probably the past 12 years, had just a lot of stuff happen in my life, professionally and personally. And so last year, as I shared publicly, I had a cancer diagnosis, and really very few symptoms. I felt okay. But my husband and I, when we opened the laptop and looked at the report, which you can do nowadays. I mean, I had so little experience with the healthcare system because I'd always been so healthy. I didn't know that you could literally get a diagnosis before your doctor told you. But when I opened it and saw the diagnosis, my immediate reaction was, okay, this is what's next. And because I had already, quite honestly, it's not the hardest thing that had happened to me before, but because I'd done so much work to build up these tools that help me tap into and be proactive about building my awareness of this resilience, it didn't devastate me. That's not to say it wasn't painful and that I didn't have some stuff to learn, because every hard life experience is here to teach us something. Whether we want to acknowledge it or not, depends on whether we get a similar life experience again. But yeah, that's not to say it was easy, but it's just like, okay, it's going to be okay. I knew that. And that's, what I want to convey to people with these conversations is that innately you might not feel okay right now, but you have the power within you to change that experience. And you don't have to wait for your boss to change or for the organization to do things differently. Again, not to say that change isn't really necessary there, but you don't have to wait for that. You're fully empowered. And with the tools and techniques, some of which we will share here, it's very accessible to everyone.
Fantastic. And on that note, do you want to kind of wrap up? I'm just looking at where we're at time, but I love the thing that you just said. And just briefly, I love the fact that mindset is probably the biggest thing that we can use to influence our influence. And just knowing that everything's going to be all right, even if it's not going to be all right, it's still going to be all right, is one of the biggest things that we can do in terms of shaping our mindset. But do you want to share a little bit about what's maybe up for next and what?
Yeah. So we're starting off these meetings. There'll be the schedule will be a little erratic. We're having the next one next Friday. I'll schedule that here shortly this afternoon. And also, we would love to share some tools and techniques that we use in our own practice, in our own personal practice, and with the work that we do with our clients. So I will drop a link if you're interested in a practice for this week. We'll try to do it every week. Click that link and we'll send you a tool that we know works because we work it, and it's neuroscientifically researched and proven too. So yeah, wonderful spending time with you, Earl. Thanks everybody who joined or who's watching this as a recording. And please keep coming back. You know, this is a paradigm shift that we're trying to make happen. And we really want people to walk away feeling empowered and inspired. That's our intention here.